All right, guys. Now, Rush Hour 4 is a project that I've talked about before. I've talked with different people about it. I made a video about it before, and I'm on the fence about the Rush Hour 4 being in development. Now, that's not to say it's actually in development. There are talks about it, and there have been talks and plans for the last few years, actually. And not much has come of it. You know, whether it's been caught up in development hell, we can't get anyone to produce it, whether the actors aren't actually being able to commit to it. Though both Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker have said they have expressed their interest in a fourth outing in the Rush Hour series, but unfortunately, I don't really think it's warranted. I like the Rush Hour films. I would say my favorite is the second one. And the third one, to a lot of people, is a bit of a disappointment, which I can see that in a lot of respects. There are some formulas that I wish that they would go with a Rush Hour for. I wish they could kind of somewhat go in a different direction about. One of the biggest problems I had with the Rush Hour films, especially Part Three, which I think highlights it the most, is the more the films, the series continued, the more it felt more like they were. It didn't feel balanced regarding to the themes of the films. And what do I mean by that? In the first film, it was the Asian villain, and it kind of delved into more Asian uh, it was more Asian themed because you had an Asian bad guy and it was Asian themed, and then the second one it was you know they went to China and it was more Asian themed with Asian villains, and then the third film pops around and it too followed that same thing, and almost every single one of the villains was tied to Jackie Chan's character, and I don't feel and I felt like Chris Tucker's character was a bit along for the ride. Although he does have some good moments, and he does have some a lot of some input that actually progresses the films and everything. I feel like that if you're gonna have a Rush Hour 4, which I think the last time I read up on it, every time I go into Russia, I don't want them to go to Russia. I would like to have a villain that has ties with Chris Tucker's character, and it comes back to America. And there's a bit of a culture shock in these films where you do see Chris Tucker being bit, delving more into the Asian culture, and you don't really see that much of Jackie Chan doing the same thing. And I would, so I wanted to see that be a bit more of a culture shock right there, and see them kind of exchange cultures and learn from each other's cultures. Which again, you don't really see that in the with Jackie Chan's character, though you do see it with Chris Tucker's character. You see him trying to learn Chinese. You see him learning martial arts. You see him even quote unquote, dressing the style. But you don't really see that too much of Jackie Chan's character. And I do feel like, okay, if they are going to do another Rush Hour film, that the villain is going to be somehow tied to Jackie Chan's past, and it's just going to be a bit of a repeat formula. Now, the reason why I like Part 2 more than I like Part 3 is Part 2 felt very like the stakes were higher. Uh, and and yeah, that was a bit of comedy. I feel like the third film focused a little bit too much on comedy, and also with the film, the villains are the triads. So these are some pretty bad mamma jammas. You would think that the film will be much more large scale in terms of like action and story. I mean, if you're dealing with the triads, this is like potentially some John Wick type stuff. Even if you look at Lethal Weapon 4, where they had to deal with the triads, I believe the triads. It was some Asian gang, but I believe it were the triads. Theirs felt more large scale than those in Rush Hour 3. So I'm interested, but they definitely got to sell me on this one, because Part 3, it could have been just so much more. Then I do feel like they're kind of doing this thing where they're going on this, and it's got me kind of worried about it, because they were saying they were going to Russia, and I'm like, so what? All of these Rush Hour films are supposed to be different culture shocks, because the first one is Jackie Chan going to America, Chris Tucker going to China. them going to France in the third one, and then potentially them going to Russia in the fourth one. I think that's the gimmick is a little bit over at this point. So every movie they're going to go into a whole new, totally different city and country, and like I don't want to see that. If they're going to do that, I will want them to focus back on America, have some jokes here or there, be less jokey, have them engage a bit more in each other's culture and stuff, rather than Chris Tucker acting more, in the Asian thing, Asian, somewhat Asian culture. Have Jackie Chan act a little bit more like he's from America, or some symbolism of it. And also another thing that kind of worries me is that these two aren't young anymore. Especially Jackie Chan. Jackie Chan, I think, is maybe 20 years Chris Tucker senior, 20 years or something like that, 15, something like that. Jackie Chan is, he's in good shape and everything, but he is surprisingly in age. And it's like, at this point, it's like, can he keep up? Do we want to see him sit here jumping off from buildings and doing all these crazy stunts and doing all these fights? I mean, I've had an issue with Harrison Ford being in the newest Indiana Jones film, and I kind of had an issue with it in the previous Indiana Jones film. And I was thinking to myself, why would I want to see an old person? Even Michael Keaton returning as Batman, I was like, I don't want to see an old Batman. I don't want to see some old guy doing all of these stunts and stuff. I just don't think it'll work, man. And this just gets me. Like, I like a good idea, and if the idea is good enough, I can see potential for continuation with sequels and then potentially prequels if it calls for it. But I don't know if I'm burned out on Rush Hour or just the idea of it at this point. It's like, how much more story can they tell? Like I said, I like the chemistry between Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan, and I'm just worried that this will feel like just a cash grab. Hollywood's on tumbling off a cliff right now with ideas because they try to remake things and do sequels. And again, I'm not against remakes and sequels, but this one, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm on the fence about a Rush Hour 4. If they get the right person to write and direct, maybe we can have something. But as of right now, I'm just because right now Jackie Chan, I believe, is still making films. Chris Tucker is in the new Nike film, but I'm like, how many movies has Chris Tucker actually been in since he? I mean, really, outside of Rush Hour, you don't really think of Chris Tucker. And mostly, and he really blew up early 2000s. Pretty much in the 90s and early 2000s, but you don't really see him really much in anything anymore like that. So I don't know if this is something that'll benefit Chris Tucker because he's not really in movies like that, making movies like that, or just passion project just to continue the story of Rush Hour, which again I think it can work. We just need the right people behind it. It has to be a good story. And again, I don't want it to be this thing where it's supposed to be based on culture shock. Every film is supposed to be a different country and everything. I would like for it to just be a good story involving these two characters that have respect for each other, and they're dealing with what they're dealing with.